Hi, Krista.
Hello, Christina.
I'm excited to chat with you today about progression planning.
Or succession planning, as many people call it.
But I was like, why don't we start there? Most of us know this as succession planning, so why progression planning and what makes this distinction so important?
Yeah, great point. I think most people think of it as succession planning. When they're thinking about succession planning, they're thinking about retirement. And like, oh, that person's retiring, they're going off. Whereas progression planning, I think about as like an organization is growing. That doesn't necessarily mean anyone is retiring or that someone is replacing somebody's exact role. It means that they're growing and that new roles might exist in the organization in the future. And how are you ideally trying to intentionally promote from within? There's a lot of value. It's cheaper from a business perspective to promote from within, but it also provides growth opportunities to keep people long-term, keep the knowledge you have. And then the kind of silly thing that you've heard me say before is that I'm more about the pro than I am about the suck. And so the progression planning just has a better vibe in thinking about the future versus thinking about the past in some ways.
I love that. Think about the pro, not the suck.
Yes.
Why I was really excited to talk about this letter in the people framework is just how like we at Building People always talk about the people, and like this like very tangibly focuses on how are we growing our people within, how are we helping them progress. But thinking about where a business might be, whether they're just starting out or they've been around for many, many years, are there certain elements that have to be true for an organization in order to implement succession planning or progression planning?
Certain elements. So I would say, I've said this in every video that we've done so far, is like understanding what your business goals are. And so you've got to understand, where do you want to grow? What are you anticipating? Are you thinking that you're going to get into new sectors of the construction industry? One example that many folks probably weren't anticipating was the like dry up of lab space in in 2025 and probably even in 2024. And so how are folks able to pivot, and what can that look like? But also revenue goals, and as you grow, if you're thinking about your next year, 3 years, 5-year plan, what is that going to look like? So understanding those two things, then from there, ideally building out some sort of org chart of where you currently stand and where you're anticipating that to look to be in the future based off of those revenue goals or those kind of like sector differentiators or overall goals in general. And then one thing you could do with that org chart is actually put revenue to each role, to say, okay, if you're these like senior level individuals, this is how much overall revenue we are anticipating that role to provide. And so the CEO would have the entire, your overall $100 million revenue or whatever that number is, $20 million revenue. And then, what does it look like from an estimating perspective? What does it look like from a superintendent? What does it look like from a project manager or PXs or whatever, however you want that to be laid out? You can truly start to build it out from there to see kind of revenue-wise where you're anticipating folks to be. So that would be a couple of things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I usually approach talking about progression planning with clients.
So usually I'm asking like, hey, what does your current org chart look like? And plenty of times folks have an idea in their minds of what it looks like, but nothing written on paper. Big believer, if at all possible, of just having something on paper to constantly look at. I just think there's a lot of value in having something there that can be edited. Doesn't need to be edited for every new hire, but if it can be edited every 6 to 12 months, that's great. And then again, looking at overall business goals and saying, okay, if these are your current business goals, and this is your org chart, let's look at the future. Let's look at each of those departments and say, okay, who is the current leader in each of those departments? And then who would be the next in line? We have this great template that we can kind of link to this video to say, current department, current leader, next in line, how long it's going to take them. The next in line might not be for 10 years. And that's something to acknowledge and to be mindful of. That might be okay for the business goals that you have, but it might be a struggle. Again, I'm all about having the data and the information, and so that's really, really helpful. And then what skill gaps do those folks currently have that we would need to focus on and work on to get them to that next place? So that is usually the kind of beginning of the conversation with clients to talk about progression planning.
I feel like in the beginning of this, when you talked about how the definition of succession planning versus progression planning, it's not always about all the folks that are about to retire. Do you find that a lot of times clients or potential clients are nervous to talk to you about this, or like they're a little more hesitant?
I think sometimes people are like, oh no, we're a pretty new company. The leadership is in their 40s. They're like, no one's retiring anytime soon. And I'm like, oh, well, like if you have business goals, that might not, again, your role as a CEO or as a COO or as a project executive or senior PM or whatever these roles are, the actual descriptions might change over the next 3 years. As a small business, for us, like our roles are regularly changing, and oftentimes, maybe if you're a senior PM or a PM currently, maybe there aren't PXs at your organization, but you're anticipating a need for a PX in the next couple of years because of the growth plan that you have. Great. We probably need to build out a job description for that, which isn't super difficult, especially with AI and ChatGPT, right? Like there's a lot of ways that we can get that information to what that looks like. Or you already have a PX, but business development isn't something that they currently need to do. In a few years, it might be. So acknowledging kind of some of those pieces is the first step. I don't think that they're like, oh, I want to hold this close to my chest. I don't want you to see what our business goals are. It's more of acknowledging that this is still a requirement or a really great business practice to do, even if no one is planning on retiring for many years. Like, still do the process, still think about the future. And a lot of leaders are excited to look at the vision and be able to actually start to build out a roadmap for what that can look like, because you can feel in the day-to-day, there's no way we're going to be able to get to 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, like, or you want to do that, but you know that you're going to have to hire extensively, and that is expensive. How can we look at it and think about what internal opportunities might we have to save money, but again, to like grow people, because that, like, you don't want to just, I don't think most businesses want to have it where we're just acknowledging, oh, they're going to be with us for a year, and then we're going to have to get rid of them because we're growing faster than they are. That's not what most business owners have any interest in doing.
Yeah, one of my original questions was, like, what happens when organizations fail to think about progression planning? But now that we're in the less suck, more pro mindset, I'll rephrase. Okay. What do companies or organizations stand to gain when they focus on progression planning?
Truly a roadmap. You know, like there are those books of like 1,000 things to do before you die, right? Or there's a gentleman that I think has like written out 300 things he wants to do with in the rest of his life. There are all these people that are doing that. Goal setting, the SMART goals, right? Anything that you can do to try and be intentional about where you want to go and where you want to grow has a lot of value. So I think there is a level of excitement to see, wow, we can actually get there, and this is how we're going to do it, because we can't do it without the people. Like, this is a people business. And so in order to be able to see those goals become a reality, there need to be a lot of other pieces in there, marketing and business development, but the people piece tends to be the hardest. And so ensuring that you've got plans for where your people could go and a path to build them there up to those spots, or acknowledging that there's a gaping hole and you might have to hire somebody externally. Either one of those is okay. It's just better than acknowledging, oh my God, I have to hire 10 new people in the next 3 years and replace myself with someone externally that I don't even know exists currently.
Can you tell me about a time where you successfully helped a client like build progression planning into their business?
Yeah, we had a client that came to us for that one-day intensive and they didn't have any job descriptions. They had just kind of like done some they were a smaller organization in terms of management and operations, union organization, so they had a lot of folks that were laborers, union laborers, but maybe 30 people, project management, superintendent-wise, and executive leadership. And so had recently kind of like done a reorg to have some more formality into those roles, but no job descriptions around who they were. It was just some of the more tenured folks. No plans for what that growth was going to look like. They just, I think every year over year, had this idea of 20% growth for the next 3 years. So kind of sat down and said, all right, let's, as part of our one day, they spent time looking at what their current org chart was, which again, sometimes is surprising to me, but is this exercise that folks don't have a ton of time to take a step back and look at their business in that way. They are always just reactive and having to kind of make the business decisions for the projects. And so giving people an opportunity to take a step back and look at the business big picture is nice. Had them do that org chart and then thinking through, okay, what is this going to look like in 3 years? You all said your business goals were to increase revenue 20% year over year for the next 3 years. What additional roles do you anticipate needing? Are you going to need more junior estimators? Are you going to need more senior estimators? Like, are you going to need a general super if you don't have one already? Are you going to need a safety director? So kind of having some of those, thinking through the different departments, and then being able to say, okay, what do we need to build out to get there? And so so they did the one day, and then 2 months later had job descriptions for 75% of the roles, including these like higher level leaders. Had hired a safety director, which they didn't even really anticipate needing, but acknowledged when they were looking at everything and kind of what some of their business goals and major losses entailed. There was this need for a safety person, and had built out kind of individual plans for, I think it was 4 or 5 senior leaders, and had promoted 2 of them in that 2 months time frame, and also built out compensation plans around this senior PM role that they didn't have prior to this, but were able to build, thinking about compensation bands, all of this stuff that really came about because of progression planning, but in some ways was just structural people operations stuff that needed to take place. And so continuing to meet with them weekly or monthly around some of these goals, but that is probably one of the more exciting, like quick wins around progression planning. Great question, thanks.
What about what's next for building people? Like, we're 5 years into the business now. Where do you envision most growth for you or the team or the business as a whole?
I love it. So sneaky. As you know, we're full from a program development perspective of like being outsourced learning and development for larger organizations. However, I want, and I think we all want to help the construction industry with its people operations. We have a love for people, hence the name and the framework and all the things. But I envision us spending more and more time with the smaller organizations, the companies that are under 100, maybe even under 50, to build out their people operations and provide them with learning and development opportunities that they normally wouldn't have. They wouldn't be able to coordinate, they wouldn't, like, cost perspective. We can provide that to these smaller businesses that I think sometimes get looked over, but would be, I think, and everybody at Building People knows this, that we have a soft spot for these smaller businesses where you get to wear a lot of hats, you get to, grow in different ways. Your career path doesn't necessarily have to be as linear as it might be in other organizations where it's like, okay, now I'm an assistant super and my next role has to be a super. Some larger organizations it doesn't have to be, but I think with these smaller organizations you have more of a voice and you feel like more than just a number. And so that's kind of our want, and I could envision focusing more on helping those small companies and being able to build up more of that and having everyone on our team available to interact and help those smaller companies more. That's what I'm envisioning.
I love that. When I like picked this topic to talk about, I remember raising my hand first being like, I want progression planning. I was like super excited about it, and listening to you talk about it just like reinvigorated all of those feelings. You know, it's like a chance for business owners to kind of like reflect, really look at their business goals, like where they want to grow, and like make sure, you know, anything they do is like really grounded in that mission and like the vision for the future. Gives them an opportunity to like really look at their people, the ones that are like driving their business forward.
Yeah.
It's a cost savings like in the long run, and also just like you said, provides that roadmap so we can always like check back in and like make sure that we're like moving towards the goal that we had envisioned for ourselves, and if not, if we're pivoting, how are we pivoting and how are we taking everybody along with us?
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome.
One more thing that I just thought about when you were saying that. Antonia Hawk, you know that we brought her here. She's a customer experience expert. We used to work with Ritz-Carlton. She like has talked about kind of some of the negatives around having high potentials. And when we think about progression planning, right, in some ways we are highlighting the fact that there might be a few folks that are high potentials that we're envisioning for the future. The reason that she thinks about high potentials negatively is because she's acknowledging it from a customer experience perspective, that some customers love those high potentials so much that if that person leaves, the customer might go with them. And so I guess what I'm acknowledging as a part of this is that I am pro high potentials and kind of training for all but more for some in some ways. That is a Waters Corporation concept that I believe they talked about, or that's where I heard it. But also acknowledging that there needs to be a consistency. And so maybe you have a few folks for each of the roles that you're thinking about if it's 5 years down the line or 3 years down the line, and that you're ensuring that a few of your kind of like senior folks that are going to get promoted are understanding their impact on the business, what it looks like from a customer perspective, and how their role is going to be vital in the organization down the line. And so just not sure that I have an answer, but just a concept to think about that, like I always thought of high potentials as in a positive way. Antonia Hawk was thinking about it as more of a negative, that they very much like customers tend to flock towards those individuals and if they leave. And so how can you acknowledge that there could be the pros and cons of both, but building out a plan that you're wanting to keep those high potentials here, and that you're intentional on what that looks like, and that you have the chance to let them know, hey, we want to focus some extra attention on you. Here's what we are thinking about your role, or what we are anticipating your role could look like in the future. Again, acknowledging that like some folks are going to want it faster than others, some folks are going to want the pay along with that, and so just making sure that you're being intentional on how you're communicating that, keeping folks excited and engaged, and really thinking about your customers long term too.
Yeah, just like another example that companies that are implementing progression planning really have a true understanding of their like people workforce. And you know, obviously like we're in the business of learning and development, like we want opportunities for like everybody at the business, but sure, high potentials, we're like focusing a little bit more on them. But I love just the concept of, great, that's all the questions that I had. Thanks so much for chatting with me and sharing a little bit more. Excited to see all of this work, this progression planning that we're helping some of our clients with come to fruition.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Thanks.